It is the 11 Dubcast. I'm Johnny. He's George, and we have so much to talk about today. It's the off season, officially the off season. I guess March Madness is winding down. We'll talk about that a little bit, but there's still, I mean, football is eternal and never rests for even a moment. So of course we're going to talk about some of that. I'll talk about some basketball, some transfers in, some guys staying or transfers out, some guys staying in. Including we actually have some women's basketball transfers to talk about that a little bit. So let's start off with this, George. We are deep now into spring. Okay, we are now in the spring session. Spring football is here. Practices are going on. There's a lot of I think anticipation for what people are going to see kind of in the spring game, just because this is going to be such a different team in a lot of ways. But one of the things that I thought was interesting, we talked about this on Slack a little bit, but there was a question that popped up. It was like, who is a player on Ohio State's roster that you think isn't getting enough hype in the offseason? And based on some of the things that we've seen from the coaches, based on some of the things that we saw last year, is there anybody that you're really excited about? Is there anybody that you would really want to see perform in the spring showcase or practice or whatever the hell they end up calling it?
No, I'm a terrible person to ask this question because I'm the guy that wanted to dump the bucket of cold water on Jeremiah Smith last year, and look how that turned out.
But that's fair. There's precedent for that. There's been so many wide receivers in the past who people have talked up and up and up and up and up coming into the spring game and throughout spring practice. And then once the season actually starts, you're like, oh, okay, here we go. And then they don't actually do anything. Obviously, guys like Jeremiah Smith and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Chris Olave, and I guess a bunch of other guys I can mention didn't really live up to that, George. Yeah, but I'm old enough to remember Ty Williams, T.Y. Williams, Ray Small, like there's a lot of different names out there who popped up big in spring and didn't really perform when the season started. So I get it. I understand what you're saying.
But it was, you'd like to talk about doing the hedging at life. And that was me doing a very emotional hedge, which was, I'm not going to anoint this guy the best receiver in college football, someone that could leave school right now and be the number one pick in the NFL draft until I actually see the results on the field, which isn't the fun answer, but it's just you safeguarding yourself from being let down from
you don't want to be hurt.
Ridiculous standard that almost no player can live up. I mean, really, I don't know in my lifetime if any player had the level of expectation without playing a single down in college football that Jeremiah Smith did going into this season, most recent season.
Not relative to the hype.
And he lived up to it.
Yeah. Not relative to the hype, I think, that people had built up during practices. I think there have been players who have been recruited and had bigger hype coming in to the point where it was like, this guy's going to, revolutionize football and blah, blah.
Oh, like, Terrell Pryor definitely
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly who I was thinking of. But that's prior to him coming to campus. When he was actually on campus and people are like, okay, this guy's a little bit of a project. I think the narrative changed a little bit. But I agree with you. As far as someone who was actually in practices and the coaches and the reporters and everybody else observing going, holy crap, we've got something here. I think Jeremiah Smith was the guy. And actually, because it was in that situation, instead of him, being so unbelievably hyped before he came to Ohio State, which, by the way, I think he was like a perfect rating on the Rivals rankings for their high school recruits. It's not like he was unheralded. This was a 5-star guy considered to be probably the best player in his class in America. I'm not taking that away from him, but I don't think he was billed as this like revolutionary instant NFL ready kind of guy until he actually got on campus and they started to see what he could do. So that doesn't happen very often.
But there were still a lot of Ohio State fans that expected a lot out of him even before they got into practice. And he started, making the routine one-handed catches that he ended up replicating in game situations as the season went on. So my point with all of that is I'm always the person that sets intentionally low expectations to hedge against disappointment. So asking me which one of these players, when Ohio State is facing insane roster. I don't want to say insane roster turnover, but there's a lot. We're cautiously hoping that Ohio State is going to tie the record that Michigan tied themselves last year in terms of total number of players selected in the NFL draft.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get to that situation without one of the drawbacks being the team that is coming back next year is going to be filling a lot of different shoes across a lot of different positions. There's a lot of roster turnover. And so most of the guys that are still here from the national championship team are already getting the appropriate amount of hype, whether it's Jeremiah Smith on offense or Caleb Downs on defense. From there, if you're hyping up players that haven't really gotten the opportunity to prove themselves to this point, not everybody is a Jeremiah Smith.
Right.
They're not all going to be able to live
What?
up to those lofty expectations that are often set for Ohio State football players.
I refuse to believe that. Sorry.
Well,
I'm an Ohio State fan. Every player that is recruited by Ohio State should be rightfully a 5-star, and every player that isn't recruited by Ohio State shouldn't even be on the recruiting ranking services. That's how I feel about it.
So I think
you can't change my mind. Sorry.
I think every player has been getting an appropriate amount of hype. That being said, I was fairly impressed, and granted it was in often mop-up duty last year after the two guys in front of him battered and bruised the defense for the majority of the games that turned into blowouts, but I was reasonably impressed with James Peoples last season.
Yeah.
And I would be more concerned if he was going to be having to effectively replace the workload of two departing running backs that are presumably going to be drafted within the first 3 rounds of the upcoming NFL draft at least.
Mm-hmm.
But the early returns on CJ Donaldson from West Virginia are fairly good, not only in terms of what he accomplished over there, but I believe that he's already slimmed down or I don't know.
He lost like 10, 12 pounds, something like that. I think.
So he's already kind of, getting into a different, he's already achieving a different peak of physical conditioning than what he had at his previous stop, which, is a good reflection of the impact that Carlos Lachlan is having on these new guys. And I would think that there's going to be a similar positive effect with James Peoples. And we talked about on a previous episode, this is really going to be more of, I think, the prove it year for Carlos Lachlan, how effective he is, because he was inheriting such a good situation last season. I think James Peoples is going to do right by both him and himself and that entire running back room in this upcoming year. I am optimistic about what he can do, particularly given how much talent Ohio State is retaining on its offensive line, even as Simmons and others are leaving. I still think that this is a good situation for him to be in and to prove himself. So maybe Peoples isn't getting as much hype, but he's also never really had to operate in a starting role at Ohio State before. So he's still got to prove it as much as anybody else, but I'm cautiously optimistic about what he can do this season.
I think he'll be good. I agree with you with Lachlan. It's interesting because, if you take away the obvious super big talents of Henderson and Judkins, it's like, okay, well, the cynical way to approach is that anybody can coach that dude, right? Those dudes, they can go ahead and they'll look great no matter what. I will say that I think with Lachlan, though, a lot of people have said some really positive things about him. The running backs, I mean, that's still a difficult thing to manage when you have a guy coming in who is SEC player of the year. They're splitting carries, you know what I mean? And trying to keep those guys happy, but also focused. I don't think it's as simple a job, at least in terms of a coaching, thing that you have to do as it might be made out to be. Now, in terms of success, they're going to have success, but there's still a lot of management that you have to do there. This is a different problem that he's got to solve, right?
We did a show last year in which the subject during the offseason was, can a Travion Judkins backfield coexist?
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to keep both of those guys happy. And then granted, they play a 15, 16 game schedule, but they both end up finishing as 1,000-yard running backs, and that's one of the only times that's ever happened in school history.
Yeah, and so now you've got a different kind of situation. Yeah, you got a different kind of situation that you have to solve. But obviously, I think, even with the admittedly really good talent he had to work with, I think he did a good job. I think he did a really good job as a coach, and he's got a lot of positive feedback from players and other coaches. They seem to really like him on the staff. So that's awesome. For me, I kind of look to the defensive side, and this is another kind of coaching job that I think is going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. With James Laurinaitis, another guy who I thought did pretty well with the linebackers. I think the linebackers played really well. Cody Simon, I think, just got continually better as the season went on.
Laurinaitis skeptic.
I was a Laurinaitis skeptic. Well, it wasn't. I mean, I was. I don't want to soft pedal it. I mean, I was a skeptic just in the sense that this is a guy who had very little coaching experience, and yes, he was a incredible linebacker at Ohio State, but that doesn't mean you're an incredible coach. I feel like he did a good job. I think that guys like Sonny Styles and Cody Simon played really well. Now you
have withdrawn your skepticism and thrust it upon Matt Patricia.
That's right. Yeah. So I have to be skeptical of somebody. I have to have some kind of cynical dislike based on past performance or nothing really. But I really like Arvell Reese and what he showed in small flashes last season. I thought he played really well when he had to step in. And of course you got Sonny Styles.
He's getting some early hype.
He is getting some early hype. I think Sonny Styles is too, but I think the linebacking crew as a whole, I think they're going to be one of the sneakily really good units on the team. Laurinaitis also hyped up Peyton Pierce, a guy who's obviously a lot younger, but he's going to get a lot of playing time. He's going to probably step in and have that Arvell Reese role this season. So I'm really excited about that unit, and I do think that they will be a strength of the defense that may be a little unexpected for people. So I'm excited about that. Another thing football related that happened recently, of course, was Ohio State's Pro Day. A couple of players had some opportunities to maybe rectify not great performances at NFL's Pro Day, particularly Will Howard at the NFL Pro Day did not have a great throwing day whatsoever. He was super erratic, inconsistent. And then he comes out on Ohio State's Pro Day, and I think he went 65 for 67 with 2 drops. So seems pretty good.
I didn't realize those 2 incompletions were drops.
Yeah, they were drops. So
that's a pretty good day.
That's a pretty good day. So, all he has to do is get drafted by a team willing to play all of their games in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, and I think he should be fine. And assuming, of course, that they draft only Ohio State wide receivers and they don't play against anyone.
Which is why I think it's funny that now suddenly it seems like Emeka Egbuka is being targeted by the Steelers in addition to Travion and Quinshawn and Howard himself. There's hey, as an Ohio State Steelers fan, I'm thrilled if their first 3 picks in the draft this year are Egbuka, one of Travion Judkins, and then Howard in that sequential order. I'm not going to turn my nose up at that. Seems like a big investment in one school, but the Steelers take care of their Buckeyes traditionally, that aren't named Justin Fields, and you could do worse than drafting a bunch of players from one school that just won the national championship.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either. I actually, this is more pertaining to the Bengals. I know that there was some chatter about them hovering around Jack Sawyer a lot at Ohio State's Pro Day.
Didn't the Bengals draft a quarterback receiver combo that played at the same school and won a national championship?
Yeah, it worked out pretty well.
Did it?
Yeah.
They didn't just granted, they had to allocate like 75% of their salary cap to, those 2 players. And
yeah, but they're good players, right? Like it worked out. It's what you want. It's funny because Andy. So I'm like I said, I'm a very tepid.
What I'm saying is Will Howard and Emeka Egbuka are going to be the next Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, happening. For the Steelers, yes. All right, okay.
And they're going to zone the Bengals out of any future AFC North success.
Bengals are going to do that to themselves. I don't think that's required. But speaking as a very tepid Bengals fan myself, Andy on the site, who's also a pretty big Bengals fan, he was excited about that prospect. But if you go online, you look at all like the social media and stuff, people were like super salty, super sour, I guess, on Jack Sawyer, the possibility of him being a Bengal, which I don't really get. I mean, I understand that if you look at his career as a whole, he was definitely inconsistent in the first 2 or 3 seasons, but I don't know how much you take issue with his last season. I think he played really well in general in 2024. Now,
I think it's because he kind of profiles as a tweener,
right? And
he's a little bit undersized
right.
to be an NFL defensive end, but he's not, quick enough to be like a pure edge linebacker in a more versatile sense.
And
he's kind of in a difficult spot.
And that's what I was going to get at. Like, I can understand maybe, kind of taking a number just with his size, with his build, because it is kind of difficult to find a spot for that guy sometimes in a defense and a scheme. But I also feel like he's versatile enough where you could put him, maybe not on end, but like as a, like a 3 tech or something like, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, I feel like he could, huh?
I don't agree with that.
All right. Well, fair enough.
Sorry.
I'm just saying, my point is that I think the dude is going to be an asset. Is he a first round asset? No, I don't think so. But second round, third round, I don't know. I mean, I think he will help out a team where he's drafted, provided he can
I
keep
would
that motor
much
going.
rather have JT Tuimoloau than Sawyer if I've got my pick of drafting Ohio State.
Is that purely based on size, or I mean, they're pretty much the same size.
I think JT is more for what you just described that you think Sawyer could be. I think Tuimoloau is much more versatile and a better athlete than
I just
Sawyer
don't see him.
is.
I don't see him as that different. I guess I don't know.
They had similar issues in terms of consistency when they were at Ohio State, which was the frustration of watching them play in tandem. It was like one would show it. It wasn't until this most recent, and we've made this point a million times, it wasn't until it was this most recent playoff run where both of them were showing up in the same games. It was always either one or the other or neither of them at all.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I feel like Tuimoloau was still more consistently productive over the course of his Ohio State career. I mean, we're talking about two guys that were not consistently productive, but he was at least a little bit more. The best game of his career came against Penn State when he was, I believe, a sophomore. Like, he had bigger moments throughout his career than Sawyer did. It's the biggest moment of Sawyer's Ohio State career up until this most recent playoff was going to be him heroically halting the flag planting of Michigan after they had already lost the game. It wasn't until he went on this crazy run in the college football playoff. It was that and a Cotton Bowl in which he had like 5 sacks in the first half that was totally for naught because Lincoln Kienholz was the surprise quarterback for Ohio State after Devin Brown got expectedly injured. So I hesitate to believe that Sawyer is going to have a more productive career in the NFL than Tuimoloau, and I would rather have him, I think, going forward than Sawyer. But especially because how differently do you think Sawyer gets? If let's assume that Ohio State still beats Texas, but that they don't do it because they were already up by a field goal on Texas at that point in the game. Let's say that they get that goal line stand and they stop them, but Sawyer doesn't have that scoop and score moment.
Yeah.
How differently do you think he is remembered at Ohio State if that isn't the climactic moment of his career as a Buckeye?
I mean, I think that's a fair question to ask. I don't know. I do think it's different. I mean, if they go on to win the national championship, the narrative, that's the interesting thing about that, because I do think the narrative for Ohio State during those 4 games was shaped so much by explosive plays. You know what I mean? By like, okay, they hit all these bombs to Jeremiah Smith, and then, Jack Sawyer had this strip sack and score, and, they had that huge bomb to Jeremiah to, seal it against Notre Dame. Absent that, I feel like the narrative would have been about the defense rather than the offense in general. And I think he would have gotten some attention, but not the same amount as like Caleb Downs, for example, right? Or like somebody else who, made a big impact. I mean, the thing that I do think is important to note with that team and with that game in particular is that how many times did they sack Quinn Ewers, right? In that wasn't it like 8 times or something insane?
I don't think it was that many. And in fact, I think that was like one of the only plays that Sawyer actually made in that game. The bigger thing that they did in that game was that they had a ton of, to your point about remembering like the defense as a whole, is that they had a ton of pass breakups.
They did. Yeah, they had a lot of PBUs.
They had like 8. They had like 8 or something. It was an obscene number. I
was thinking of the Rose Bowl where they had like a billion sacks, but they did have
right.
Let's see. They had,
which was a big game for JT Tuimoloau.
Yes, they had actually absent that strip sack, JT Tuimoloau actually, you could argue, had the better game against Texas, but they had 4 sacks total, which is not bad. I mean, that's a good amount.
No, that's great.
Yeah,
4 sacks is great.
But JT Tuimoloau had 1.5 of those, and then 2.5 tackles for loss.
2 seasons before this, we would have gladly. I think they had like 1 game in the Big Ten last year with 4 sacks.
Yeah,
the season prior to this most recent one in which they won the title in 2023.
So, no, I mean, I think that's a fair point from you. Those kind of things definitely reframe the narrative bit because they stick in your head so much, right? Like that's what you're going to rewatch over and over and over again.
He thrust himself into like Ohio State glory with that play.
Right.
But if that play is absent and everything else is consistent in terms of what ended up happening, I think it's a very dramatically different conversation about how he gets remembered than what has actually taken place since. So I think he dramatically helped his legacy with that play, and he'll be remembered for it forever. But when you're talking about what the guy's ceiling is in the NFL, or even just what their general trajectory is, one brilliant play does not an overall player make.
Yeah. That's fair.
And if you do subscribe to that, then you're probably not going to be a very good talent evaluator.
Well, if you do subscribe to that, you might be a scout for the Cincinnati Bengals. So, of which there are like 5.
Granted, after that catch Ryan Williams made against Georgia, I said he was at the moment better than Jeremiah Smith. So, we can all be.
He might have been at that moment. And then he kind of fell off.
That is still the best play I've ever seen any receiver make.
It was pretty
Jeremiah, for all the brilliant things Jeremiah Smith did last season, nothing that he did was anything close to that. But he was way more consistent at making high level plays than Ryan Williams was.
That's absolutely
true. He's definitely the better between the two at this point.
I would agree. So a couple of things I want to talk about here relating to basketball. The Final Four is now set. It's now straight chalk. So, who cares? That sucks.
That's sort of what I had in my bracket. I picked everybody except for Houston to make the Final Four.
Okay.
But
I mean, that honestly.
I also had Gonzaga in the Final Four. They were at 8 seeds.
I don't know why you would do that, but
I didn't pick them to win the national championship. I just picked them to go to the Final Four.
Okay, well, fair enough. Well, they've done that. They've done that a couple times. You know what?
So I underestimated Houston.
If the tournament hadn't been canceled in 2020, they would have won the championship. So it's fine. I'll give you partial.
I underestimated Houston, but Houston only beat them by 6. And then the game after that, I also thought Purdue was very fraudulent, especially because they lost to Ohio State of all teams.
Yeah.
And they only beat Purdue by 2 points.
Yeah.
And then they ran Tennessee out of there, but that only just makes me believe that Gonzaga could have beaten Tennessee in the Elite Eight. So I thought that was the most wide open division of the 3, but I felt reasonably good about Auburn getting through. I told you when you asked me like a month ago when Ask Us Anything, somebody wrote in who do you think's gonna win the March Madness, and I said Duke, and I was just kind of being half lazy about it because of Cooper Flag. But I mean,
at this point,
is that really such a ridiculous?
Yeah, no.
Take?
What are we talking about? Like,
right?
They look like the team to beat. So,
and I like Florida a lot too. I think that they're probably the deepest team left, and I have Duke versus Florida in the title game with Duke beating them. So
I'd go with that.
I
I'd
felt
roll with
good
that
about
right now.
that. I will say I was expecting. So I was expecting, the latter half of the tournament where, the Final Four, Elite Eight. I was expecting very top heavy in terms of the higher seeded schools to mostly make it into there. What I wasn't expecting, I thought we were going to have more traditional chaos in the earlier rounds and that there would be more upsets, and we didn't really get that. And I've seen a lot of people that believe that now that we're in a more firmly established pattern of the transfer portal era of talent from these mid majors migrating to schools that have more resources, presumably to pay them what they deserve, that's a consistent pattern that's going to be set in stone. So what I was going to ask you was, are you subscribing to that theory going forward? It sounds like you're skeptical of that being the case.
I think it's just too early to tell. I honestly, I mean, that kind of stuff's been happening in college basketball, just not like it's been happening ahead of time. And this isn't the difference between college basketball and college football, and why you can't make that 1-to-1 kind of comparison is because a guy in college basketball come in from high school and make an immediate impact right on his team and be like, okay, I'm scoring 20 points a game and whatever. And so a lot of that can happen before a season even starts with recruiting and whatnot. So a lot of those teams that are going to be good no matter what, because they're getting all the best players in the country. And we've seen that for a long time. I don't think that's new. And I don't know that, I don't know, especially now that you have to pay these guys like a lot more than you already were. Because honestly, people complain about like football recruiting being like crooked or whatever before. And I'm like, okay, let me introduce you to college basketball recruiting. But I guess my point is, like I said, it's just too early to tell how it's going to shake out. We've had really chalky kind of March Madnesses before, and even in recent history where it was just not exciting. There weren't a lot of upsets, not a lot of close games. That's not like an anomaly. It happens. But if we see this pattern develop where it looks like this for like 3, 4, 5 years in a row, then yeah, maybe. I mean,
well, but okay, so let me give you a bit of a different example then. Just kind of reframe it. I mean, yeah, to your point with, the way high school talent migrates into basketball and has a more immediate impact than they traditionally do with football. That's valid. And in terms of, the programs in place having the resources to attract that talent, that's been consistent for a while. But what I'm more referring to is, you think about a situation with someone like Ja Morant. Ja Morant, who is still one of the only players, I believe, that's ever had a triple-double in the NCAA tournament. The list isn't very long, which is kind of surprising. I remember when I think him and Draymond Green, I could be totally making this up, but I seem to remember it's him and Draymond Green are in like rarefied territory, I think, in terms of being like the only players in the history of the tournament to have like multiple triple doubles. I could be wrong about that, but I know that they're in that kind of like rarefied.
It makes sense.
Territory.
They're both, excellent players. I get it.
He didn't play at a big time program. He played at Murray State and then became, I believe, the second pick in the NBA draft. But he basically fueled Murray State into going into March Madness.
Right.
I wonder in this era now how often we're going to have players at schools like Murray State stick around those schools to fuel those kind of mid-major Cinderella runs.
Yeah.
When it would be so much easier for somebody like a Ja Morant to be identified by a program like Arizona or Kentucky and be given, a ridiculous amount of money comparable to what they might get on an NBA rookie deal if they were to depart for the NBA draft to go play somewhere else instead. Does that trend not alarm or concern you relative to how this current iteration of March Madness has worked out in terms of its top heavy just top heavy results. You're still not worried about that being a long-term trend going forward?
No, I mean, I think that's a fair point. Like I said, it's hard for me to project that far in advance. I mean, it could be like, yeah, I mean, you could have that situation, right, where guys are kind of poaching other dudes, and we see more of that as as it goes on. I just don't know. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of unknowns about how this is going to work long term, and the impact it's going to have on certain schools. One of the things that I saw, and I thought this was an interesting point, and again, I don't know if it'll actually happen or not, but Murray State isn't paying players for football, right? Like that's not a priority for them, I would imagine. So I guess the argument could be made that some of these other schools, they don't have to split their money between, and their time and attention between multiple programs, right? That's not something that they have to worry about. A lot of these places, they've got one big program that they give a crap about, and it's basketball, and that's where all their resources and time and money is going to go into. Therefore, it might make them a little bit more attractive to, a guy who maybe he's not one of the best recruits or best players in America, but he's still very good and can help them out long term. And they can offer him, a kind of package or money that other schools may not want to do or feel comfortable giving that. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it all kind of plays out. Ohio State, speaking of transfers and people going places, Ohio State's got a couple of men's basketball guys who are piecing out. Michi Johnson, obviously, I mean, he only played 10 games with Ohio State. It's unfortunate the way it worked out. He was talking about a lot of mental problems that he had and something that he was struggling with. So all the best to that dude going forward. And then Evan Mahafy's out. He's going to Akron. So, definitely more holes that Ohio State's going to have to fill. But they kept Mobley for next season, so I think that's a big.
Well, Mobley already filled the Michi Johnson
exactly
chasm during the season anyway, so that's one hole they don't have to worry about.
Yeah, so that's good. He did not play super well towards the end of the season, but you know what? Nobody on the team really played that well towards the end of the season.
He was still Big Ten all freshman though, wasn't he?
I think so. Yeah, I think he was. So, I mean,
that's like, I would have been very, very concerned for Diebler if they were not able to retain a player of that caliber.
That would have been rough.
That is a very good first step in the right direction in terms of what we needed to see from Mahafy. It's unfortunate, but frankly, wings that can play defense and not really contribute anything else offensively, it's not hard to find guys that fit that description, frankly, when you're Ohio State. They can find somebody that replicates Evan Mahafy's skill set in the portal without having to look very hard. Somebody like Mobley, I don't want to go as far as to say guys like Mobley don't grow on trees, but it's harder to replace somebody like that, particularly when they were, I think, probably overall a net positive for your. I think you would be hard pressed to argue a player that is all conference as a all conference freshman was not a net positive for your team. You want to retain players of that caliber, and that's exactly what Diebler just did. So in terms of avoiding the mass talent exodus that some of us were fearful of in wake of how the season ended, I think this is a very optimistic first step in the right direction. It'll be interesting to see how many other players leave or stay. Obviously, we still don't have word on Bruce Thornton yet, and that's going to be a very, very big pivotal decision here.
I'm sure that's something that's being talked about intently, with the team and boosters and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of conversation going on around him. McMahon from the women's team is out. Scotty McMahon, she's out.
Speaking of talent exodus.
So 2-time All Big Ten. Yeah, that's one of their best players, if not their best player. I don't know, Kevin McGuff. There's a lot.
That is not a vote of confidence in McGuff.
No, it's not, and that's a big problem for him and that program. And yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, Ohio State has had trouble down the stretch in sealing the deal. It's really interesting because It's weird to make this comparison, but it almost feels like a James Franklin kind of situation where it's like, wow, these guys look so good and they should, do all these great things in the postseason and, win titles and stuff. And they just never do. And,
they better take that Michi Johnson money and throw it at Jeloni Cambridge.
I'm fine with that. Like, whatever. Like, shoot.
If they lose her on top,
yeah, forget about it.
Of Connie McMahon, it's
I don't know what they do about that. But she's one of their best players, and that's rough. That's real rough. So we'll see what happens. They have a lot of talent. They've always had a lot of talent. It's just putting it together and actually becoming like a consistent program, especially in March Madness, and that they've never really been able to do. And I don't know if McGuff's going to get them there. We'll see what happens. So we'll do Ask Us Anything here in a second. Before we do that, we remind you that the 11 Dubcast is sponsored by the Dry Goods Store at 11warriors.com. Shirts, hats, stickers, all kinds of great stuff. Check it out. It's pretty cool.
Johnny's got a hat from Dry Goods on right now.
That's right. Oh. And of course, some really cool shirts that we got coming in too. I'm really excited about some of those. So let's go ahead and do Ask Us Anything. You can ask us anything by sending us questions to dubcast at 11warriors.com. And like I said, just ask us anything. We love to be asked things or anything. Okay, so let's go ahead and get these up here.
How many we got this week?
We've got a decent amount. I want to say we've got like 6-ish.
Oh my!
So let's do it, which is good because we don't have a ton in the back half of our. We don't have a ton in the back half of our.
Oh no, we've got a very interesting, highly speculative.
Oh, it's a cool story, but about. I'm just saying we don't have a ton to get.
I don't know if "cool's" the right word, but it's fun to speculate on for sure. But we'll get there when it comes.
All right, let's start with this. This is from Craig. Craig has kind of a lengthy one. I'll try to summarize it here a little bit. But he's talking about. Another program that deserves scrutiny. He's talking about baseball. So prior to 2010, Ohio State's baseball team under Bob Todd, what a great name, routinely won or competed for the Big Ten title.
Like Ricky Bobby. He's got Bob two Todd. First names.
And so anyway, Ohio State's had 3 baseball coaches since 2022. So Justin Hare, the current coach, was hired by Bjork after Bill Mazziello resigned and went to TCU, and there was a guy ahead of that. Current team is setting up a new standard, having given up double-digit runs 12 times. They were swept by Iowa after giving 42 runs in 3 games, and now they're 0-6 in the Big Ten. I think this was written a little bit ago. I think they might have gotten
it was written before that. We're recording this on Sunday, the March 30th, and it just so happens that this weekend Ohio State swept number 10 Oregon in
That's
baseball.
Right. So
it as dire as it seemed a week ago, things are slightly rosier this heading.
Well, they didn't sweep them, but they did 2-1. They went 2-1 against them.
Okay.
And won in dramatic fashion. They won 11-10, so good for them.
So they're still giving up double-digit runs in games.
Well, so that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, they're still giving up a ton of runs, so that's really interesting to see that. And I think it's a fair point. It's Justin Hare I saw when he was hired, everybody was going on about this is just an absolute can't miss,
sneaky, brilliant
perfect
hire.
Yeah, genius hire. And I kind of brought that up.
Turned Bucknell into a blue blood baseball program.
That's right. And I mentioned that on our staff chat and Slack, and someone pointed out to me it took him a couple years at Bucknell to really kind of turn this thing around. It wasn't something that happened overnight. And I would add, if you've got a program that's had that much flux in just the past few years, it's not going to emerge as a powerhouse overnight. It's going to take.
He's their 3rd coach in 4 years.
Yeah,
right?
It's going to take. Yeah, it's going to take a minute. It's going to take some time. So I'm willing to give, especially in a sport like baseball, right? I'm willing to give at least a couple of years here to right the ship a little bit, and I don't know, just figure it out. So I'm not too worried about that.
I think what just happened is a very good response in wake of the fact that things can, because they not only it's one thing to give up in more than half of your games through more than 20 games of the schedule 10 runs on its face. That's really bad. they had another game earlier this year when they were up like, I think they were up like 9-0 or something on Alabama, and they lost.
That's
like
bad.
So they and then Alabama was like on, like their team was recording like TikToks or something after the game where they were like mocking Ohio State. Like it was a bad
Baseball's
look.
gotten so disrespectful in the past like 10 years. And part of me thinks it's funny, but also part of me is like, okay, you need to chill. Like it's basically like a bunch of kids who are away from their parents for the first time, and they're just like doing whatever obnoxious thing that comes into their head because for years they've been told they can't.
The Batista bat flip was a lightning rod moment in the history.
Ruined a generation of baseball players. Exactly. I don't mind any of the performative stuff in theory.
I don't either. It makes every sport better. I don't know how you could hate it.
There just has to be, like, if you do it too much,
you're a fossil.
Well, yeah, but if you do it too much, it gets like obnoxious and not cool anymore. And so like well, I think when you see a guy like flip his bat because he like got a walk or something, it's like, dude, chill the hell out.
When have you ever seen that?
I've seen that. No, I've seen it.
No way you've ever seen
that.
They
do these like rage bait clips on Instagram.
No way. Have you ever seen a bat flip after a walk?
I saw one guy, he hit now to his credit, he hit a home run. Okay.
I would, if a pitcher walked a runner home, I would bat flip just to show up the pitcher. But in any other circumstance, no way would you ever see that.
I saw a guy who hit a home run, and which is fine. Like, you want to flip your bat, I don't care. But he took his bat and he hucked it like 40 feet into the air.
That's
like
what
onto
Batista,
the field.
That's what Batista
No,
did.
he didn't. No. Batista did not do that.
Did.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't.
Flew off screen.
Yeah, but I'm talking about this guy literally threw it straight up into the air, and it landed, like, seriously, like threw it like 40 feet straight up into the air, and it landed on the field of play. That's
I thought you were
little
saying
stupid.
Landed on like the catcher's head or something.
No, yeah, he killed a kid. No,
whoa,
no. I mean, like, I'm just saying, there's a time and a place like that. The Batista bat flip wasn't like, it wasn't during a regular season game where they were losing 7-2 and he hit a solo home run.
But
like,
he yeeted that thing.
I know, but it was like during a moment, and like, you have to, if you want to do that, you can't just do it all the freaking time. I'm just saying, there's a time and a place. That's all I'm saying.
You have never seen a bat flip after a walk. I refuse.
I bet if I type in bat flip walk,
refuse
on YouTube,
to believe.
I'll find like 500 examples right now.
No way.
No, I'm going to do it. You've already been wrong once on this episode.
It's going to be like a Key and Peele skit or something if you actually see it. It'll be staged.
Well, okay, so. Hold up. So I did find multiple examples of this, including in major leagues.
No way.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I just found one. I found it was a compilation of two. They're both okay. One was the walk in a run, though, so I'll give that.
And that was my point. If you're showing up the pitcher that does something as bad as walk in a run, that rattles the pitcher.
That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But another one that I found was not one of those situations. It was literally just it was literally like, I got to walk and I'm flipping my bat.
Okay, but you had never seen that prior to deliberately going to look for it.
Well, you don't know that.
Okay. All right.
What's this one? I found another one here.
Anyway, baseball is a pedestrian enough sport, pun intended, that, with the walking, that it could use some excitement. And so the more showmanship, the merrier in my book.
All right, this one's from Peebs, who says, "Hey guys, my girlfriend and I are trying to get more into football. That's a good approach. I think you should do that. We understand the rules and how the game works quite well, but things like trying to identify plays before they happen, so like pre-snap positions, pass plays versus running plays, etc., are lost on me. I really want to start contributing more to mid-game conversations with my family this season. Can you give me a crash course or recommend other ways to know the sport better?" I'll get to you have one more question here that we'll get to after I say this. So I think it's really important. I'll give you three things off the top of my head. One, Joel Klatt has done a lot of really good explainers on YouTube. He's got a lot of short videos where he kind of explains kind of like, intermediate level football concepts in a really digestible way. I think that he does a good job with that. So
this
check
is
that
the
out.
kindest thing anybody has ever said about Joel Klatt. I must say.
I think they're good. Honest to God, I think he's made some good videos on the subject. I will also say that at 11 Warriors, Kyle Jones has done a lot of really good stuff with his X's and O's breakdowns that we have on our YouTube page. If you want to go back and look at very specific things, like that had happened in games, he breaks those down very, very well. You got the whole teleprompter thing. I love those videos. I think he's done an incredible job with them. And then in general, and this is just kind of like, a starting point, just watch the offensive line, right? See what the offensive line is doing, particularly like what the guards are doing, how they're lining up, are they moving around, that kind of stuff. And that'll give you a pretty good indication, at least in just terms of what the play is going to be. It's not going to like make you an expert, but I think it gives you a starting point. So I don't know. Do you have any other suggestions, George?
Yeah, kind of building off that, because I played center for 3 years on varsity in high school, so I had to learn how to read a defense. The most basic like football for dummies tip that I can give that was put upon me that I had to use for basically every pre-snap read, and you can too, to get a sense of not only what is the defense anticipating from the offense, but what's going to be the offense's best way to attack what is in front of them, is just count the guys in the box. And the box is not a literal shape, but it's one that is figuratively drawn around the players from the top to the bottom that are on the offensive line of scrimmage, so not the receivers. Basically, if you were to think of the offensive line, and then let's say that they've got tight ends on either end of the line, it's the outside of one tight end to the outside of the other tight end. And then if you were to draw a box around that section of the offensive line that is roughly the same size as on the defensive side, how many defensive linemen and linebackers are within that box shape? And you're typically going to see anywhere between 5 and 8. Anytime that there's 5 players in the box, ideally you're going to want to see a running play. But in most cases where the defense is putting 5 guys out there, it's in an obvious passing situation. The offense probably has like 5 players lined up as receivers. There's no running back in the backfield, so they're selling out to defend the pass. 6 and 7 is typically where it gets a little more, it's easier to disguise what's going on, right?
Yeah.
But even 6 guys, you typically still want to be able to run against that front, because you're typically getting 4 down linemen and only 2 linebackers that are available to cut off the mid-level of a running play on the interior, or you're getting 3 down linemen and 3 linebackers, in which case you've got 5 offensive linemen lining up against 3 defensive linemen. You would think that they're going to be able to at least effectively shut off those 3 guys with 2 linemen that are then able to go to the next level and cut off the linebackers. So 6 and 7, there's different ways they can rotate. Gets a little more inconclusive in terms of how to attack it. 8 personnel inside the box, which is, that's what you think of with the 85 Bears, or even the typical Harbaugh defensive schemes. They're basically selling out to stop the run.
Right.
Which is what you've got to do a lot of times when a team has, a Derrick Henry type of player, in terms of just a threat of a guy to fall forward for a guaranteed 3 yards at a minimum basically every time. But when you are an offense and you're able to dedicate or get a team leaning on those 8 guys in the box, a great example of what can happen is the play that sealed the national championship for Ohio State against Notre Dame.
It's really funny you say that. Sorry to interrupt. It's really funny you say that, because Peebs actually, that was his next thing that he was asking. How could you identify what was going to happen, or how did you have a hint about what was going to happen before that play kicked off?
That's incredible that is literally what he was.
I know, right?
About.
Right.
Because, this is just, it feeds directly into what I'm talking about here, because you could recognize that not only based on the personnel out there, but just on the situation generally. Like, it was in Ohio State's best interest to milk as much clock as possible, to force Notre Dame to take the remainder of their timeouts. It would have been in their best interest to just keep the ball on the ground, run out as much clock as possible, even if they, don't get the first down there, they have to punt the ball back. Notre Dame's still going to have to go a long ways in order to put themselves in a position to tie or win the game.
Right.
But you still, if you got some chutzpah, you can take a shot if you were confident. And granted, they had Jeremiah Smith, and Will Howard had been super accurate not only that game but for pretty much the whole season.
Yeah.
So they forced Notre Dame into a situation where they figured they were going to have to sell out to stop the run. And they took advantage of that by getting Jeremiah Smith in a one-on-one situation. Notre Dame had 8 personnel in the box, which meant there were only 3 other players on defense that were able to be elsewhere on the field. So they had 1 safety back. They had 1 corner on the other side of the line, and then they had 1 corner on Jeremiah Smith. They give Will Howard I would think they went play action on that play. I can't remember that part of the play, but I would assume there was a play action fake.
A little bit. I don't know that it was like super. I don't think it was like a super like we're rolling him out. I think there was a little bit of a play action, but I don't think it was like, okay, let's have him run all the way to the.
In any event, they put Notre Dame in a position where they were almost totally convinced it was going to be a running play, and then they got Jeremiah Smith in one-on-one coverage, threw him a jump ball, and that became the, as some people like to refer to it, the 3rd and Jeremiah play for Ohio State.
And if you were watching that play from the beginning, the play action stuff, the box stacking and whatnot, I think that's a big part of it. But a part of it too is knowing what kind of defense Notre Dame really likes to play, and the fact that they're not going. If they hadn't broken tendencies to that point in the game, they weren't going to do it on that particular play. And so essentially, you've got a guy on an island with Jeremiah Smith. He fakes a slant route. The guy bites, and like, he doesn't have a choice. Like, you have to hit the slant, because if you don't hit the slant, and that's what it is, he catches it for a first down and then probably scores a touchdown immediately. Right. So he was just trying to he was playing the cornerback was playing the percentages. He was like, okay, I got to stop this, because if it's a bomb, it's a bomb. And what the hell do I do about it? But he got turned around a little bit. Jeremiah Smith got behind him, and Will Smith, as soon as he saw that it was one-on-one, Will saw him break and then went, sorry, came over, and that was it. So Will if you have Smith a wide shot,
jiggy with it, throwing the ball to Jeremiah.
Thank you. That's very good. So I hope that helps, Peebs. Definitely check that stuff out. I think it's very helpful. This is from Matt from Charlotte. So, hey, George and Johnny, this might be more of a question for Johnny, although maybe for George. He doesn't want to presume. But who do you think wins the Tour de France this summer?
Good read by you.
That's not up your alley.
I have never had a good thing to say about any cyclist, as somebody that wishes those people would not share the road with car drivers.
I love it. Cycling's great. I love the Tour de France. I watch it every year. I'm big into it. So Tadej Pogačar is looking nearly unbeatable 2 years in a row, and be a very cool accomplishment. But maybe Jonas Vingegaard.
I totally know who those people are.
Pogačar, so first of all, if you don't know these guys, that's fine. I understand. Not everybody is invested in cycling as much as I am. Pogačar is interesting because he's a young dude. He's a Slovenian cyclist, and cycling is really, really big in Central and Eastern Europe, and Europe in general, right? Like, that's really where most of the best cyclists come from. This guy's 26. He does some insane things, and I mean, he's not my favorite guy, and I honestly, I don't get super into the guys that I support. I'm rooting for God, who was the one? I think he was like a Venezuelan guy a few years ago. But anyway, my point is I don't really get invested in these guys individually. I do think it's really cool to see kind of the rivalries that develop. Like Jasper Philipsen, I thought was cool. I know that he had some big face-offs essentially against some of these guys, because they're roughly the same age, right? Like, these are guys who are all kind of coming up around the same time. And I think that's kind of, that's fun to watch when you watch these big tournaments.
I had no idea you knew this much about this sport.
Well, so I like cycling. I've done the Pelotonia a couple times. I just think it's really fascinating. It's an incredibly difficult sport. Like, it might be, I think, the most difficult athletic feat that any athlete has to do on the planet. I am not exaggerating. I like guys like Primo Roglic he's also Slovenian. He's also older, which is why I like him. I like the old guys. A couple things about cycling I just want to point out real quick, and why I enjoy this so much. If you haven't been on a bike for a long time, maybe since you were a kid, I encourage you to get a bike and ride 5 miles, and you will go, that wasn't too bad. Like, it's not great. My legs are a little sore, but it was fun. And then you'll go out and you'll keep doing it. And then I encourage you to ride 10 miles, and you're going to go, okay, I don't love this, but it's still been a lot of fun. I'm not sweating. I'm not hurting. I'm feeling good. Then ride 20 miles. That's where you're going to start to hurt a little bit. That's where you're going to go, oh man, okay, this is a little painful. The most I ever got up to, I'm not a regular rider as much as I used to be, but the most I ever got to where I felt comfortable kind of just doing whatever was like 40 miles, okay, in one go. Now, I did Pelotonia, which is longer than that, but it's like, like they have little break stations and you can refill your water and get food and all this kind of stuff. So they make it really easy.
How long did that take you? Like 2 hours?
I did 50, or like 55, when I did it. I can't remember. I was slow. I'm a slow rider. Let me be very clear. I think it was like 3 hours, something like that. And that's not bad. These guys are riding between 80 and 120 miles through the French Alps every day for 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
And so I want people to understand, like, just go out there for like 5 or 10 miles, see how you feel, and then double that, and then double that, and then double that, and then do that every single day for a month. That's what they're doing. And that's what blows my mind. These are the most incredibly conditioned athletes on the planet. They are all juiced to the gills with performance enhancing drugs. I want people to understand that. Like, these guys are...
They call it cycling for
That's
a reason.
right. That's right. That's the get on the bike, right? No, these guys, I mean, they're tested, but cycling is super crooked, and that just makes the whole thing more entertaining. So I don't know, man. Like, Pogacar, I mean, he's very good. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's not my favorite, but I don't really like to see guys dominate in the way that I think he has. But I'm excited for this Tour de France. It's been really fun. Honestly, it's been really good for like the past 5 or 6 years. Every year's been a ton of high drama and a lot of fun. And it's just cool to see. So, this is another question here. Oh man, we got a lot of questions. Okay, we got to get through these quick. This is from Paul. It is completely understandable that you pump the dry goods store because it's employer related. Does George work for Waffle House?
Oh, I wish. I would live there if it was socially acceptable.
People do, basically. I mean, like, it's not.
If I ever end up franchising a restaurant, it would be a Waffle House.
Oh, same. Are you kidding me? I feel like that's got to have the highest success percentage of any like franchise situation you can get into.
I would think so. And I'm shocked that when I was in South Florida, there's only 3 locations. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
That sounds like a business opportunity to me. This is from a good friend, Alvin. What is your greatest achievement? Simple question with answer that in 40 seconds.
Making it to 11 Warriors.
Yeah, that's a good achievement. I would hope it's not your biggest achievement, but it's a good achievement. I would say, I mean, becoming a husband and father, I would say are pretty, like, it's not like I did, like, a lot wasn't required of me to get to that point, but afterwards I feel like, to be a father, it's a lot of work, and I'm very lucky to have, a great family and support system in place, and, an awesome wife. But, to toot my own horn a little bit, like, you gotta put in that kind of work too. So I'll say that if, raising my son, if I can do that and he's happy and healthy and kind, then I would say that would be my greatest achievement. Okay,
I don't plug my side venture very often, but in 2023,
you put a lot of work into that. You should definitely be proud of that.
Well, I try, I try not to be, I try not to lean with that lead with that in terms of my personality and whatever else. And, I'm just glad there's enough people that tune into, what I do here rather than, trying to also get people to cross over into something they may or may not be interested in. But in 2023, my side project, which is, MMA racks, betting on the UFC, the average ROI for a financial advisor in the United States on an annual thing is like 10%. I, in 2023, using only parlays, which absorb a much, much higher amount of risk than, just betting regular straights, I was able to achieve an ROI of 33% using the same amount of investment for every, I think it was like over 40, I think it was like something like 42 UFC events for the entire year of 2023. So I did 3 times better than the average financial advisor does picking stocks and hedge funds and whatever. And I did it just projecting the winners of fights.
Not bad.
So
I like it.
I'm very, very, I don't know how many people are actually able to appreciate the difficulty involved in that, but it's something that I'm incredibly proud of. And it's one of the reasons I think I've been able to build that brand up to. I'm hoping to hit 2,000 followers on Twitter before my 3-year anniversary at the end of May. So if you could go follow that account on Twitter at MMA Racks, and I'm like 50, 60 away from that goal at that point, I'm reasonably optimistic.
Oh, you can get that.
And I'm not going to keep cross promoting or plugging it on here very often, but specifically for answering the question, what is our greatest achievement? That's, I think, pretty high up there for me.
I like it. That's a good answer. Last one here. We'll do this quick. Who do you think is the most important football recruit for the team to land? That's from Kevin. I actually think
Mini Mutombo. I'm not even kidding.
No, I mean that's not a bad answer. I would actually say the most important recruit for them to land is the recruit that they need to keep, which is Chris Henry
one
Jr.
that Michigan wants the most.
Yeah, right. Whatever would make them the most angry. No, I want to keep Chris Henry Jr. I know there's like a ton of chatter with him in Oregon, and ostensibly you like already have him, but like no, I think keeping him and keeping that going with the wide receiver room is important. So yeah, for him, that's where I'm at.
I think it'd be pretty unfortunate if he were to bail for some reason, but honestly, as long as Hartline doesn't go anywhere, I can't see any reason why he would defect.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That'll help.
I don't know what reasonably Oregon could offer him that would dissuade him from going away from a surefire developmental place for wide receivers like Ohio State. I just don't know what the selling point would be further than infinite more money.
Give him his own shoe. I don't know.
Table. Whatever, dude. Like,
I don't even know if kids care about that. Honestly.
You're the son. I mean, not only that though, you're the son of an NFL player. Like,
right.
if you put in the work, I mean, wasn't there just another like son of an NFL player that just left Ohio State that just had a very big public beef with a memorabilia company that presumably worked out in his favor in some sort of settlement?
Right. Right. Yeah, I don't think Chris Henry Jr. is necessarily so short-sighted that he's like, oh, I got to get in, while the getting's good. Like he'll be a success probably no matter what, or at least
I hope not.
Well, I imagine that's what he believes in himself. So, and I agree with Brian Hartline staying at Ohio State. That's a big point.
I also wonder too, like especially for these recruits that commit early and then tease these other teams with visits, like how much of it is them just gaming favors and
probably a lot
out of like people's like, oh, I'm
yeah,
I'm maybe you could persuade me,
I mean that's what I would do, frankly. Like, it's the smart move.
It kind of feels like what David Sanders Jr. did to Ohio State.
Yeah,
right?
With Tennessee. Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Ask Us Anything. Thank you for asking those fantastic questions this week. Those were great. last thing here. Nobody knows where Mel Tucker is. Brenda Tracy, who is a rape survivor and advocate, was, she filed a lawsuit against him for harassment and things like that. And nobody can find the dude. So they're trying. I mean, I guess it's in civil court, I assume. I'm not really sure. I don't think this is a criminal prosecution. I think she's, going after him civilly, and nobody knows where the hell the dude is. So I don't know. I mean, it's really interesting that, how many years are we removed from Michigan State throwing like $100 million at this guy to now he's like hiding in the wilds of the Upper Peninsula?
He got that contract in the middle of like 2021, I think, and then got dismissed the season prior to this one.
That's crazy.
He got like a year and a half into that deal. He got I can't remember how long the deal was for.
That was for like 10 years. I think it was like a 10-year deal.
He got at least 8 figures. And there was, a dispute about Michigan State trying to justify firing him for cause so that they wouldn't have to. I don't know if they would still had to have done some sort of percentage of his buyout, but they at least wouldn't have to do the entire thing for getting him removed. That being said, he still presumably got at least 8 figures from Michigan State. And if I had my reputation destroyed, whether or not like I did it to myself or it was unjustly put upon me, whatever the reason, if I am a public pariah and I suddenly have 8 figures at my disposal, I think I would also use that money to disappear.
Yeah.
And just remove myself from society and enjoy the rest of my life sleeping on a big pile of money like that guy from Breaking Bad. Like I would do totally the same thing.
Just dig in there. Yeah, I mean, I guess the moral of the story is don't hire creeps, and certainly if you're going to do that, don't give them like tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions. I mean, it's just mind-boggling how panicked some of these people get who have these decisions to make when it comes to just throwing money at people. Mel Tucker was obviously not a good choice for that. So anyway, that'll be interesting to see how that plays off. I look forward to him getting served on a boat in the middle of Lake Superior. That'll be interesting. But
he's on a yacht at international waters.
That's
why
right.
He's no longer subject to the laws of the United States.
Yeah, somebody lures him into the United States, like within 20 nautical miles of the coast.
He's on a yacht with all the other crypto billionaires.
Yeah, that's right.
Shilling
right.
NF Tuck.
Yes, there you go.
Still.
Exactly. All right. So
I think that website is still active. By the way.
For God's sake!
I need. Let me go confirm that right before we end the show.
It's just his face. It's just his face with like bitcoins for eyeballs instead. Don't get
SpartyNFT.com is still active.
Oh, for God's sake!
NF Tuck, buy it now. The momentum is real. The future is now. NFTs for a cause. It is still he has been fired for a year and a half, and this thing is still active.
I want to know the last
person.
Has
not been shut down.
Hey, if you're anybody within the if you can hear my voice, if you're within the sound of my voice, and you bought an NFT based on Mel Tucker or use that website, please reach out to me at johnny@elevenwarriors.com. I need to talk to you immediately. Like, I need to know what was going on. I have
a bridge I want to sell you in Brooklyn.
That's right. Also, I have a fantastic opportunity for you to double your money in just 1 week. No, I don't. I know nothing about anything. So that's the Dubcast for this week. We'll be back next week to talk about all that stuff and try to sell you on some kind of Ponzi scheme. But until then, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care, folks.